Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Mindlessful. On this episode, we have Caitriona hAnluain, who is, I want to call you the queen of astrology. I know you go by a karmic astrologer and you read birth charts and you're a creative and you also teach astrology. So I want to thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for having me, Kira, and I will definitely accept the Queen title.
Yeah, well,
I love that. Thank you.
that's what I think sums you up. And I personally have had my birth chart read, and I was just telling Caitriona that I've listened to it so many times, and every time I read it, and listen back to it, I just get this sense of just feeling so seen and so understood. So I'd love to know, like, how did you get into astrology?
Yeah, so Kira, it's a long story how I got to astrology, but if you don't mind if I start at the very beginning, it's a
Yeah,
long
go
story. Like
bring
as
us
a
right back.
child,
Yeah.
go right back. So as a
Yeah.
child, I did grow up in a very spiritual, religious
Okay.
home. And it was lovely, but it was a little bit, at times it was a small bit oppressive.
Mm.
And from an early age, I got fixated with, uh, life and death and what happened to us when we die. Because I heard my grandparents talk a lot about purgatory and hell and Satan. And I thought, whoa, like, and we prayed a lot as a family. We had mass in said in our home a lot. We fasted as well. So we were really like, proper practicing Roman Catholics. And I remember kind of having this a bit of a like a spiritual crisis at a young age where I convinced myself that, I had clearly sinned a lot and, eternal damnation surely awaited me. And then,
Mm.
because, I'd be quite philosophical, I thought, well, what about all the people who don't believe in Jesus that believe in other gods? So it led me to like this journey of exploration at a very young age where, I became fixated with learning about other world religions and trying to figure out what other people believed and what was going to happen to them when they died. And while all this was happening, I did have an awareness of the zodiac signs, the 12 zodiac
Mhm.
signs. And, I thought they were interesting and I resonated a lot with being a Cancer sun. And I remember going to the local library and, doing my little research in primary school about world religions and stumbling across books about mythology. And I had read a lot of Irish mythology, and I realized that, in Ireland we were once considered pagan,
Mm.
and we had our own gods, sun gods, and whatnot. And I thought this was very fascinating, that Christianity was a relatively new concept and organized religion, was relatively new. And then I stumbled across Greek mythology and Roman mythology, and I was obsessed. It was like something went off, like a light bulb went off in my head. It felt so familiar, Kira, like I wasn't learning it, I was remembering it.
Oh, I
And I
actually
remember
have
just
the
being
goose pimples when you say that.
fixated with Zeus,
Oh,
Mount Olympus, Hermes, like all of these Greek gods and Roman gods. I was like, these gods, I resonate with these because, they have very human-like qualities, they're capricious, and I liked the idea of, the gods influencing our lives and different gods having different qualities like the god Mars was symbolic of taking action and going to war, and Venus was this goddess of beauty and love and romance. And I just felt that these gods were powerful and meant something for me, but I didn't know what at the time. And I continued to be a very spiritual person throughout my childhood and teenage years. And I will say that, like, even though it sounds a bit maybe counterintuitive, I am someone that has like a deep Christian faith and I
mm.
do believe in a higher power. And that's never left me, I think, because of the upbringing I had. But I have a more kind of relaxed, maybe pick and mix approach now to organized religion. I see its merits and I see its pitfalls. I see how damaging it can be to young children if they're exposed to maybe too much of it.
Yeah.
And I kind of adopt a more open-minded philosophical approach now. that like there's a place for all of these deities, you know, and we can honor and respect all of these beautiful traditions. And really, gods are a very human way of trying to make meaning in a world that sometimes feels meaningless.
Yes, yes.
So like I resonate strongly with people who believe in Buddha or people who believe in Jesus or people, who pray to Venus. All of it makes sense to me. And then, well, I guess in my teenage years, I got deeper into astrology. And it wasn't until maybe my early 20s that I discovered the birth chart. And then I was like, wow, this is fascinating. And it was so complicated. But I was a little bit embarrassed about being into astrology, if I'm being
Mm.
honest, because I didn't know anyone else. I felt like a bit like, Little Britain, that sketch, I'm the only gay in the village. It's a
Yeah,
very
yeah,
bad example, but I felt
yeah.
like I was the only astrologer in the village.
Oh,
And, growing up, I didn't feel like I had people to discuss my interests with. So I was a little bit of a closeted astrologer. I was self-taught for, many years. I taught myself how to read charts badly, the hard way by myself, reading books, trying to make sense of it. And then I remember, on nights out in beer gardens, meeting randomers and just saying to them, "Can I read your birth chart?" And
oh,
they'd
I
look at
love
me
that.
and I'd be like, "Do you know what time you're born?" And they'd be like, "Yeah." And I'd be like, "Give me your birth chart because I want to test my skills." So I was honing my skills in the most unorthodox way, Kira, on a night out, just talking to
Yeah,
someone random saying, "Let me hone my skills."
yeah.
And I found so many like willful participants,
Yeah.
and they would be like, "Wow, wow, wow, how'd you know that?" And then sometimes they'd be like, "No, you're completely wrong." So it was like this beautiful journey of trial and error. And then I remember, I guess the older I got, the more I tried to fit in and be normal. And, I
Mm,
am a primary school teacher, so I have a very, I suppose like socially acceptable career, and I
mm,
work in a Catholic ethos school, where I would uphold that ethos and pass on the faith to children. So I always felt like, practicing astrology was maybe a bit at odds with that. And
mm.
I had maybe more misgivings than I should have had about it. Sometimes I felt like I was doing something almost criminal, and my friends would be like, "Really, Katrina, like,
Oh,
get over
yeah.
it. It's not that big a deal." And then I remember, I guess in my early 20s, no, late 20s, I would say early 30s, Kira, like I definitely, you know, recognize I went on the journey that kind of, I guess you could call it the self-healing journey where, I discovered, all of the unhealed parts of myself through my relationships with other people, specifically the ones that went wrong, and relationships that weren't very healthy for me to be in. And my pattern of remaining in relationships that weren't healthy. And I remember unpacking it in therapy, trying to figure out why do I do this? And it was when I started to go deeper into my birth chart, I could see some of my deepest patterns, my deepest wounds, and I got a lot of answers for why I was the way I was, why I wasn't like my sister or I wasn't like my friends or why I felt things so deeply. So I found so much healing and answers in my birth chart that it made me want to go deeper and deeper. And then when I guess you could say my very long-term serious relationship broke down, I kind of had a bit of, I was at like this crossroads in life where I remember thinking, it was around lockdown, and I remember thinking, you know what, like the whole world has stopped turning almost, metaphorically speaking. What is stopping me like from pursuing the thing I want to do? I've no excuse. I'm running out of excuses. And I had felt this kind of deep gap in my life that, there was something missing. I couldn't explain it, and I couldn't fill the gap with a relationship or with a boyfriend or with a nice house or a dog or whatever people try to do. I traveled a lot. I climbed so many mountains. I read so much. I studied, but still there was this like hole in me that nothing could fill. And I remember, you know, a beautiful girl actually, that I went to for some therapeutic guidance said to me, she said, you've kind of lost your spark. You need to do something that lights you up. You need to do a course in something you're passionate about. And like I had already done a master's in creative writing. I thought I had pursued it all. And I just said to her, the only thing I'm excited about is astrology. And she was like, well, why don't you do that? And I said, there's no astrology course near me. They're all online. And, I was making up more excuses. And then I eventually said, you know what, I'm going to do this course. And I remember my mother was horrified.
Oh.
My very Roman Catholic mother was horrified. Oh my God, what? And I did the astrology course, and it changed my life, Kira, because my astrology teacher saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself. He saw that I had a gift and that I was meant to be sharing it and that I was meant to be reading charts. And it was like from the moment I started that course, the trajectory of my life changed, and it was like everything started to fall into place. And I recognized that this was this big hole in my life, this void. Like I wasn't meant to fill it with a relationship, or I wasn't meant to go off maybe, like I wasn't ready to maybe get married or have a family, but I was ready to do this work. This calling was waiting for me, and it was waiting for me to get my act together. And I needed like maybe a series of unfortunate events to kick me up the ASS before I would kind of do the thing I was meant to do. I always say if you don't do the thing you're meant to do, like the universe will drag you, and I,
Definitely.
I really felt I was dragged, if I'm being
Oh,
honest.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And like that, you will definitely be dragged if we're not listening. But once you listened, was it just the path ahead?
Yeah,
You just had
it
to,
just opened up. I remember
yeah.
like setting up my Instagram page really reluctantly. I didn't even want to share my face, Kira. Like I was going to just I was going to make a faceless page. And my sister, who doesn't believe in astrology, said to me, no one is going to follow you if you don't put your face to your work.
Mhm.
And it was a great challenge, like to put to me. And I just said, you know what, you're right. I'm going to put my face to my work. Even though like I've had like comments from people locally, like, people make fun of, they call me Mystic Meg. It's all in,
Yeah,
in jest. It's all, but I was the one who had the hang-ups. There was nobody else locally that
yeah.
cared about what I was doing. It was me, I was self-conscious about it. But once I put my face to my work, and I remember just on my stories one day, I just said, I'm going to read some birth charts if anybody'd like me to read them. I just threw it out there, and like I remember I was so shocked by how many people wanted me to read their charts, and they were largely international followers. So they didn't know me from a crow, you could say. And
Yeah.
I was just like, these people are putting their faith in me to read for them. I've got 300 followers, I'm a complete novice. And then all of those people loved their charts. They told 10 more people, and
Wow.
this thing snowballed. And then what happened was I kept getting booked out for months on end, and it kept spiraling. And then I had to increase my prices to stem the flow, and then I couldn't control the flow. And then I had to set up a website. And it was like this thing grew organically. And now I can't imagine my life without my astrology business, without my clients, without this purpose, this calling. And I always say I never wanted to be an astrologer, but I needed to become one. It was like astrology chose me. I didn't choose astrology.
Mhm.
And I definitely am convinced, I did this work in another lifetime. And in this lifetime, my soul was a little bit maybe ill at ease, because it was almost like, when are you going to get back to, like, you've
Mm.
got more to do. Like maybe there was more contracts, almost like, when I read your chart, Kira, like I'm sure maybe our paths cross in a
Mm.
previous lifetime.
Yes.
Because as a
Yeah.
karmic astrologer, I'd be a big believer in that. And
Yeah.
I always say, I have a lot of heavy karma in my chart.
Mm.
And I always say, one way to repay that karma is to read the charts for people, because maybe, I owe you something. Maybe, you did something for me in a
Yeah.
past life. And when I read your chart, maybe like that's our contract fulfilled, maybe.
Yeah.
I like to think about it that way. And
Yeah.
I always say, sometimes I open a chart and I know someone's a really old soul. And I love telling them, like, you're a really old soul. And, this could be your last incarnation.
Yeah.
Some people like have mixed feelings
Mm,
about that. But I like the idea of thinking that, some of us have been here several times. And that's why we're so interested in esoteric wisdom. We're so
yeah.
interested in uncovering ancient knowledge. We're so interested in like philanthropic work where we're doing all of this healing work and helping other people. And we can never really be fully reimbursed or fully repaid for the amount of energy emotionally, I'm sure you'll agree, and mentally, that you extend doing this kind of work. It's energetically taxing, heavy
Mm,
lifting work, and it's not for the faint of heart.
mm,
Some people think, oh, it's very like I don't know, like pie in the sky, like fluffy stuff. This is not fluffy stuff.
yeah.
This work we do in this lifetime. And, you can reject the call for so long, but, until you follow that calling, your life will be like this feeling of there's something else, there's something more.
Yeah, yeah. And you can't feel it because when you're talking there, exactly how I feel about my journey. And it was only when I kind of got into all of this, and it was through the shit, like something real traumatic, and I know that's not the way for everyone, but it's often through things that happen that we wouldn't choose, but something bigger, or it's in our chart that was supposed to happen at that time.
100%. That's why, like in astrology, we call it the natal promise. And
Mm,
it's this lovely idea that when you incarnated in this lifetime, when you drew your first breath, your soul made this promise. Okay, these are the things I promise that I will like experience in this lifetime, the good, the bad, the ugly. And, not all of them will be easy, but the adversity is like this catalyst for your
yeah.
growth. And like there's some like really traumatic things some people have to go through, and they do make you question your faith. They make you question, why do people have to suffer? It's almost like that question, when you see small children get sick, why do children have to get sick? It's really hard to wrap our heads around these big questions that, sometimes we can't make sense of them. But I always try to comfort people by saying, the soul makes a choice
Yeah.
about why it came here, how long it's going to be here, and the work it's meant to do, whose lives it's meant to touch. And who are we to question, the journey of someone else's soul?
Yeah, that is so funny because the last lady who I recorded an episode with, she said the exact same words. Who are we to question the journey of the soul? Like
Wow.
nearly the exact same words.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It's a lovely space to be in. I don't know, just from a personal point of view, like I feel so blessed and privileged to be where I am in my life now. I'm healthy, I'm happy, I have a good relationship, I have great friends and family. Not everything is perfect, but like I just feel so blessed to have gotten this far. I don't
Yeah.
take any of it for granted because I know what it's like to be on the other side, to be,
Mm,
miserable, to be like unpacking trauma, to be going through stuff, to be having that dark night of the soul. But like I do know that those dark nights of the soul are what brought me here to
yeah.
this place. So, there are certainly sometimes I look back and think, God, I wish I could have done that differently. I wish I could have got my act together a bit faster. I wish I had jumped instead of waiting for the universe to push me. But, I guess everything happens in divine timing, and I
Yeah.
try to put my trust in a higher power around that.
Yeah.
And that has helped a lot.
Yeah, and that's a really good question there. When you say like within our charts and like when you decided and you took the call and you did the course and then the path opened within our charts, our birth chart, like could it be that we're trying to do something and we know we need to do it and it feels destined, but we're trying and it's like it's just not working? Like, could that
Mm.
be in our chart that it actually there's a planet or there's something going on and we know we've got the call, but it's just not the right time yet?
Yeah, I think there's a big thing around timing. And there's a big thing as well. I say this a lot to people who do, this kind of work, because a lot of people who do this kind of work have varied levels of success. And I always say define success. And I get a lot of people like I don't know what you could call this industry we're in, maybe mind body healing, this holistic industry we could call it. Some people call it new age, which really grates on me because astrology has been studied for millennia, and a
Yes.
lot of the healing work we do is certainly couldn't be classified as new age. It predates, even sometimes people like on the Bible Belt will like bash astrology and call it new age when it's much older than Christianity.
Yeah.
But getting back on topic, like a big thing I always say to people, rather than like asking, how well am I doing? How many clients do I have? Ask yourself, how can I be of service? How can I help people? Like direct the energy rather like off of your business and yourself, but direct it back onto the client. Like how can I serve them? And I always say to anybody in this line of work that maybe isn't having the lucrative success maybe that they dream of, I always say, it's a difficult industry in the sense that it's not consistent work. So we
Yeah.
need to be grounded and pragmatic, and most of us need a steady income. And then, like, this kind of work can be a side hustle, and maybe one day we'll build it to a place that we can be financially secure with it. But we can never, rest on our laurels with being a freelancer. The
Mm.
price of freedom is an inconsistent income. Like that's the bottom line, and everybody has to
Yeah.
eat. So I always say to people, if you have to have, if you want to pursue your passion and you don't want the passion for what you're doing to die, that spark to die, don't make everything dependent on that. Like you don't monetize it so much that like that's your sole source of income. Because what often happens is, I see people go into astrology full time, for example, Kira, like a difficult industry to break into, to get success in, and to get consistent clients. Like I see them not get clients consistently, things go really quiet, they get disheartened and they fall into this trap of
Yeah.
thinking, I'm a bad astrologer, or, I'm not successful, or there's something wrong with me, or maybe this isn't my calling. A lot of the time it is your calling, but you were never meant to just do that
Yeah.
one thing. You were never meant to monetize maybe something so sacred and make that your sole source of income, because astrology wasn't something like that was used frequently, maybe, hundreds of years ago. They used it like thousands of years ago. Kings and queens used it, lay people wouldn't have used it as frequently. And it wasn't something, it's like any divination tool. It's not something you would go check every single day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we're not meant to like look into the future that much. And I always say, I'm sure you're familiar with the work of Paulo Coelho. I don't know, am I pronouncing his name right? The writer of the author of The Alchemist.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So he says the most dangerous prayer you can pray is, God, use me.
Oh, yes.
And I remember praying that, when I was really at a low point in my life. And after I prayed that, I wouldn't say straight away, but like a series of events brought me to my astrology work. And I realized, okay, God, this is what you want to use me for. Let's go. Like I'm all in. I'm locked in now and ready to go. So I always say to people, like, focus on the service element and focus on how you can be used to help uplift people. And
Mm.
if monetizing your passion is killing your love for it, then it's a good sign that you need to step back from it
Yeah.
and remember that, this kind of work is sacred.
Mm.
And monetizing it sounds lovely in theory, but it's only like maybe the top 10%,
Yeah.
can live off this kind of work full time. So we need to be realistic too in our approaches.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, a few years ago, that's what I did when I had written my book and I was doing
Hmm.
workshops. And I just had this passion. And I was like, I'm leaving my job. And I actually loved my job. I was working with teenagers, but I was like, I'm doing it full time. And it was actually when I look back, there was so much lessons in it. But when I look back,
Hmm.
it was probably one of the worst things I ever did because
Hmm.
it did like that. I was like, okay, I'm doing this full time. And then, that mind part of you was like, okay, well, I'll have to do this, this, this. And then,
Hmm.
yeah. But at the time, I was like, this is the best thing. But now I'm like, no, I'll do what I love. But I know there's a part of me, I think I'm a Virgo. I'm a Virgo rising and I need that stability. And it's actually through my birth chart that I've understood, no, that doesn't work well for me not having that stability there.
Yeah, that element of routine is really
Yeah,
good for all of us, having a
yeah,
rhythm. And like most people who do this work, there's an archetype in astrology called Chiron.
yeah.
And Chiron is really prominent in the birth charts, of people like you and me, Kira, who are called to do this work, and people who have to go through a lot of maybe wounding or trauma in this lifetime. And, in astrology, he's symbolic of the wounded healer archetype. So the
Yeah.
healer can't heal anyone else unless the healer has sufficient wounding
Yes.
themselves, because you're healing from a place of experience. So
Mm,
this is why, some people are really good, let's say, in a therapeutic role because they've been through sufficient adversity. They have enough empathy to do the work.
mm,
And in mythology, Chiron wasn't just a healer, he was a teacher, he was a writer, he was an artist, he was a musician, he knew the cure for everything in nature, and he was a trainer of warriors. So the healing archetype guy, he was like jack of all trades, master of none.
mm,
So, when I see people working in this healing industry and they pigeonhole themselves into one thing and put a lot of pressure on themselves to, be successful automatically, I always remind them of the Chironic archetype.
yeah.
I'm a teacher and I get so much fulfillment from working with small children and teaching them. Like it really fills up my cup. And I also get a lot of fulfillment from doing astrology. And I've recently trained in the emotion code. I
Oh,
remember telling you about
yes,
that when I read your
yes,
chart.
yeah,
And even though I don't practice it or charge for it, I'm probably getting closer to a space where I will do that. But
yeah,
I realized quickly when I got into astrology, okay, like I've got a strong Chiron archetype in my birth chart. I'm not going to be able to rest on my laurels and just do one thing. I need to have
mm,
multiple strings to my bow, or like if I'm going to be successful, if I'm going to thrive at this,
yeah,
I need to not be complacent, and I need to remember that like I'm a lifelong learner. And it's when we think we've all the answers, that's when we're
yeah,
really in trouble. It's
yeah.
like I often refer clients to other people that I know, to other
Mm,
healers. I'm like, do you know who you need to see now? You need to go and see
mm,
this person, or you need to
yeah,
go and see that person. I have a network of people that I refer people to.
mm,
And I love that energetic exchange. Sometimes people come back to me for a repeat reading, and I often say to them, no, you actually don't need a reading from me. What you need is you need to go to this individual. It's
yeah,
like this paying it forward, as in, I brought you as far as I can take you. Now, the next part of your journey is you need to go to this person, and she's
yeah,
going to help you unpack that. And I think that's a lovely way to look at it, this
mm,
holistic wheel, I guess.
yeah. And as women or men supporting each other within
Mm,
the community. Um, I did the
definitely.
emotion code, absolutely
Yes.
amazing. But something that I really need to share is when you did my birth chart, I'll never forget it. I was listening, I was on the beach and I was listening to the recording, and you just said, it could have been 25 minutes into it, and you said, oh, I wouldn't be surprised if you just got emotional there. And at that minute, I couldn't believe it. I was blown away. Exactly when you said it, I was listening and I had a big emotional release and I was crying. And it was just the fact you said it then at the exact same time. I was blown away.
Yeah, so like when I remember when I started reading charts, Kira, like I assumed that I was just reading the charts. And
Yeah.
then I started to feel things in my body reading the
Mm,
charts. And
yeah.
this really surprised me. And I didn't know in the beginning what it was. So I'd read a chart for someone and then I'd start talking about their childhood or their father, maybe,
Yeah.
and I would get like pains in my body, usually my heart. And I'd always get this intuitive knowing if the client was crying. Now, I guess for people that aren't familiar with my work, I pre-record my readings, so I don't read them live. But I feel the pain of the person receiving the reading before they felt it. So I quickly realized, okay, I obviously am clairsentient.
Mm,
And I think that's the best word. It's when you feel other people's feelings. And that was the reason why I trained in the emotion code. because
Yeah.
I was struggling to clear the emotions of clients after the readings. So I would go to bed and I'd still be thinking about the client, or I'd still like have the heaviness in my chest. And I was like, okay, I need to be able to do this work, but I also need to hold space for people, feel their pain, but not hold it for them
Yeah.
forever. So I remember, reading your chart
Mm.
and touching that
Yeah.
raw part, that
Yeah.
vulnerability, that pain. And, I remember thinking, it's such a lovely way to connect with someone, and to say to someone like, I feel your pain right now,
Yeah.
and like I want you to honor that it's okay.
Mm.
And I think that's it's a strange phenomenon. I can't explain it. And I never would market myself as a psychic,
Yeah.
ever, because I'm trying to avoid the Mystic Meg label. But I remember discussing it with my astrology teacher. I told him, like, in confidence, I said, I'm experiencing things when I read the charts that I didn't expect to experience. I'm feeling things. And he said, yes, that can happen. And I said, what do I need to do? And he said, you need to clear your energy after you read for clients. And I said, okay. So I made that kind of part of my, let's
Mm.
say, my spiritual hygiene is what I
Yeah.
would say.
Yeah.
So that, like, it's a lovely way to connect with people, but also I need to be able to detach afterwards. And I'm getting better at it, Kira, the whole time. But
Yeah.
sometimes I don't feel anything when I read a chart, and that's genuine. But other times I will. And I think it depends how open the person is as well.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
open your heart is
Mm.
and how vulnerable you are. Because some people, like, I can be reading their charts and it's like I'm breaking down through walls, and then eventually I'll get in there and feel something. But other people, it's like they're an open book and I'll feel so much emotion. And I always think emotion, like, is meant to be felt. It's meant to flow. It's not meant to be stagnant. And it's a lovely gift, being
Mm.
able to feel other people's
Yeah.
sadness and joy and pain. So I don't take it for granted
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. It's so much more than like when you were talking there, I was thinking like, years ago when you were younger and you'd be reading in the paper like your astrology and it would be Cancer. But like
Mhm.
there's so much more to astrology, isn't there?
There is so much more. And like horoscopes in the newspaper and magazines, they've actually done a lot of harm
Yeah. Okay.
for serious
Mm,
astrologers, because
yeah.
I know magazines want to like
Mm,
promote it and celebrate
yeah.
it and include it, but I guess it's created a lot of skepticism around something that's so accurate and so sacred. It does make me a bit sad. I do think astrology is going to become more mainstream. It's
Mm.
lovely now. You'll meet like 28-year-olds and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm a Pisces rising and I've
Yes.
got an Aries moon."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Wow, like they know their big
Mm.
three." It's like, they're astrology literate, so to speak. But yeah, it's lovely to connect with someone's natal chart. And it's lovely as well to be able to feel things, and yeah, to kind of, I can't even explain it, but just it's such amazing work. And I guess there's something healing too in the receiving of a chart. I remember going to a Vedic astrologer. So I have a really good Vedic astrologer that I trust. His name is Shabam. And he, even though I practice Western tropical astrology, I'm really open-minded, Kira. Like, I always believe I don't have all the answers. Like,
Yeah.
I'd love to have my chart read by someone completely
Mhm.
objective. So he read my chart in Vedic and he told me lots of things about myself that weren't, that was complementary to what I already had learned through tropical and Western astrology. Some of it lined up and more of it was different, but all of it was really helpful. And, I remember thinking, the more objective viewpoints I gathered, the better.
Mm.
And he helped me as well with my gift. He explained to me that when I give someone a reading, he basically said when someone is sick and you give them medicine, they heal faster. And
Okay.
he said, is there anyone sick in your house ever? And I'm like, yeah. I said, I love caring for sick people. It's been like a theme
Yeah.
in my life. If anyone's sick, like I'm like Florence Nightingale, I run to their aid, I just
Oh,
love to look after
yeah.
them. And he said, yeah, he said, make sure you give them the medicine because they will heal quicker. And then I thought, well, is something similar happening with the birth charts when I
Mm.
give people their reading? Is it a sort of medicine? And yeah, he thinks so. And I
Wow.
think that could be it as well, that when I give the chart reading and when I connect with someone's pain and they feel seen and heard and that somebody knows something that they couldn't have otherwise known, there's a medicine there that I can't really explain.
Yeah. Yeah, and being on the other side of it when you say that, that really resonates because you said something else to me about another a past life where I had lots of children and that in
Hmm.
this life there may be a real yearning and like
Hmm.
even in school when everyone else wanted to be teachers or nurses, I was like, I just want to be a mom. I only wanted to be a mom. And when you said it and you're like, it mightn't happen in the way you want it, like that part of you to be like now, because you've got things to do. And since I've been told that, I just feel that it's really brought healing because it's like I understood where that part when I felt it like that kind of, oh, it was like it was quite a big feeling like I understood then why I felt that way.
Yes, and like people,
Mm,
with a similar energy to you, Kira, a
yeah,
lot of them come to me and they, I guess like, of course not all women want
yeah,
children, but like a lot of them say to me like, I'm wondering about motherhood and I see that like in a past life, they
mm,
were amazing mothers and that like they were devoted mothers and in this lifetime they can absolutely be mothers again, but
mm,
their destiny is calling them to a higher calling, so like they
yeah,
have to maybe be mothers and fulfill their
mm,
higher calling, otherwise they would be in that horrible place of maybe resenting their children or resenting the
yeah,
path of motherhood or having regrets when they get older that maybe if I hadn't had children so young I would have done X, Y, or
yeah,
Z. So it's interesting the way, when we look at past lives, which is really important, and all karmic astrologers are obsessed with past lives
mm,
because it's this energy of what did you bring with you from a previous lifetime? What was the
yeah,
gift? And where are you moving towards? What are you being magnetized towards? And even in my own birth chart, I remember from the age of 16 right up into the age of 33, I went from relationship to relationship. Like they were all long-term
yeah,
relationships, but I mean, I was in relationships so much, I didn't even know who I was, Kira, like independent of a
yeah,
relationship. I was always somebody's girlfriend. I was on somebody's arm, and I hid in my relationships. And I
mm,
remember when I unpacked my astrology, I saw that in a previous lifetime, I was lost in a relationship. I was a devoted wife and I was, a team player and I didn't stand on my own 2 feet. And there was a lot of codependent energy there. And in this lifetime, in order to feel fulfilled, I was meant to spend a period of my life on my own. And I remember when I discovered this, being horrified, going,
oh,
"Oh, what? On my own? I don't think so."
yeah,
And I remember like resisting it. And then, I I got to a point where I finally was like, right, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be on my own for a while, like, and it's hard because you've got like pressure, you've got societal milestones, you've got your mother, anxious for grandchildren, you've
yeah,
got everyone saying like, when are you going to settle down and get married? And I was just like, oh my God, no, I need to try and be on my own for a while. I need to get comfortable. And like that time I spent on my own was like the best, most like educational, it was the greatest investment I ever made in myself, committing to being on my own.
yeah,
Like I remember telling people, if you really want to find someone, do the revolutionary act of actually like abandoning dating for a while and
mm,
date yourself. Like I committed to dating myself, to discovering myself, to going traveling on my own, to living on my own. I did so many things on my own, so many milestones. And then I remember when I did meet someone, it was almost like I'm actually so complete now on my own. I'm a much healthier person to be with
yeah,
than I would have been if I hadn't spent that necessary time alone.
yeah,
And that was what I needed to do. And it was in my chart. The solution, the remedy was in my chart, but I didn't want to do it. I was resisting and I was afraid too. There's that
yeah.
fear. And there's that old book, how to, what is it? Something, it's the same guy, Dale Carnegie wrote it. Is it maybe How to Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway? And
Okay.
he talks about write down what your biggest fear is and then just make plans for if the biggest fear is realized,
Yeah.
basically what you're going to do. And I was like, what? Like, that's counterintuitive. So I wrote down, like, okay, my biggest fear, I'll die alone, load of cats, blah, blah, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember, and then he was like, well, what are you going to do then if that happens? And I was like, well, I'll probably be very socially active. I'll be involved in different things. I'll travel a lot. And,
Yeah.
I made a plan for what I was going to do if my biggest fear was realized. And then I realized, if my biggest fear happens, it's not really going to be that bad.
Yeah.
And it was so liberating. And basically, that's the psychology behind it. That, like, once you kind of move towards your fear, you transcend it and you're like, well, look, if that's the worst that happens, like, so be it. I'll be fine. And I recognized that I had lots of like independent energy, that I was very self-contained
Mm.
anyway. And yeah, so I think like it's very important to connect with our past life in our birth charts here, because the past life shows kind of where you're stuck.
Yeah.
And this life then, the north node we call it, that shows like where you're moving towards and what you're actually going to find fulfillment from. It's like the sweet spot in
Yeah.
between. You're bringing that past life gift. For me, it was that like I was a really good relational partner in a past life. It was too good. And I needed to be a
Mhm.
good partner to myself.
Mm.
And I was learning that in this lifetime so that I could get to this lovely sweet spot. And similarly with you, maybe, and the motherhood thing, a devoted mom in a past life, maybe sacrifice career goals, put
Yeah.
your children first. And this lifetime, it's about being this beautiful role model for your
Mm.
future children, that they can be like, look at what my mom did. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
who's the person you look up to most in life? My mom. You
Mm.
know, being that person that you've
Yeah.
fulfilled so many of your dreams and your goals. Um, it's a lovely place to be in, moving towards our
Yeah.
fears.
Oh, definitely. And even now, like writing a book or a podcast, I wouldn't have done any of those things. Whereas now, even now, there's so much creative energy in there. And like, I'm kind of thinking, I'll do this, I'll do that. But like, if I was a mom now, I wouldn't be doing
You
those
wouldn't have
things. Or I,
time. You
yeah,
wouldn't have time to
yeah,
do it. And that's the sad thing. And like, I can't tell you, and it's really, really sad, Kira, but I can't tell you the number of unhappy people that come to me that are unfulfilled in their
yeah,
jobs, in their relationships, in their marriages, in motherhood, and they know something's missing, and it's always in the chart. The answer's in
yeah,
the chart. And I always say, and there's a lot of people who come to me too who feel trapped because they rush towards the societal milestones.
mm,
They're really pushing us, both as men and as women.
yeah,
The divorce rate, apparently it's never been higher in Ireland than
yeah,
this year.
mm,
And like, it's not surprising because, like, let's say I was born in the 1980s, we're kind of this post-Catholic kind of era where, there was such an emphasis on get married at 30, have 2.4 kids, have a nice car, get the mortgage, get the house, have the
mm,
white picket fence. And nobody ever stopped to ask, have we done some inner work? Have we
yeah,
all gone for therapy to cure, whatever abandonment issues we had? Have we traveled enough? Have
mm,
we followed our dreams? Have we written that book? Have we started that podcast?
yeah,
Have we taken a risk? Like, have we done that startup we always dreamed of? Or did we just stay in a safe job? And
mm,
then people get, a bit older and they get so disillusioned. So like, it's so important to kind of, I say to people, like, yes, like family, motherhood, all those things, and career is so important, and having the house and the car is all important. But like, don't neglect your soul, what your soul is
yeah,
calling you towards in this lifetime, because it will
mm,
catch up with you at some point,
yeah,
and you won't be able to ignore it forever.
yeah. And it's the best feeling, isn't it, when you feel you're doing something that your soul wants to do. You can't
Yes.
even put words on that feeling.
Yeah, and the people like that need you will find you. This is the
Mm.
thing, like, you're not going to have to look for
Yeah,
all these clients. Like, people who need you will find you, the opportunities will find you. Like, the people that want you to come and like maybe speak at their as a motivational speaker at their event, like all of these people, it's like this big web. They'll find you once you step into the arena, but they're not going to find you if you're hiding, which a lot of us do, myself included. if you just stay hiding your light, you're gonna like keep finding yourself stuck in this loop, this pattern of the same behaviors, the same people. You're just meeting different, it's the same person wrapped up, in a different body
Yeah.
almost. You're meeting the same situations over and over again until you answer that calling and take a step towards the thing you're afraid of doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And if someone's listened to this now and they know nothing about astrology and they're like, because there probably will be, bar probably that they're Cancer or Gemini, um, like what would you advise them? Say if they're listening, they're like, oh my God, I'd love to have my birth chart read. But yeah, they might feel kind of apprehensive. They're like, oh, well, what if she tells me something I don't want to hear? Or what
Yeah,
would
I
your
think it's
advice
really
be?
natural to have that fear. And I do know people, sadly, that have gone for readings maybe with other astrologers and they haven't had like the most positive experience, or
Yeah.
they've been told something very like, you're someone who's bad at relationships. You can't say a big sweeping phrase like that,
Yeah.
because it's not as simple as that. Astrology is like this sea of possibilities. So what I would say to anyone, who knows nothing about astrology, knowing your sun sign, let's say you and I, Kira, were both
Yeah.
Cancer suns,
Yeah.
knowing that is a great start, okay? You know your sun sign. Knowing your time of birth then is the next thing. I always tell people to download Time Passages because it's this free app and it's pretty good. The Pattern isn't a bad app either. A lot of people have the Pattern. You input your birth details and it will kind of generate a chart for you, both of these apps, and give you a sort of a horoscope as well. Now, bear in mind, these horoscopes are computer generated, they're generic, but they're still better than nothing.
Yeah.
And you suddenly will get a bit of self-awareness, from looking at, what you're made up of, what your moon sign is, what your Mars sign is. Then, if you want to go deeper and you're ready to learn, about how you move through the world, then it's good to consult with an astrologer. And I always say to people before you get a birth chart reading, like check the astrologer's testimonies and their reviews. And, because if there aren't many reviews, then they're probably not reading many charts.
Yeah.
And we all have to start somewhere, but you do want someone who has read a lot of charts because then that, they're a trusted astrologer because this industry isn't well regulated. It's a bit like, if you go to someone for, I don't know, Reiki or something,
Mm.
it's very difficult to regulate the industries.
Yeah.
And some astrologers are self-taught. Some of us have done formal courses. Some astrologers have even done university level courses.
Wow.
They're really, really, really highly educated. It doesn't mean they're the best to read your chart, though.
Mm.
You do need to find someone with a style that resonates for you. If you like directness, honesty, and empathy, I'm probably the astrologer for you. But, I don't like sugarcoat things in my readings, but I also try to give the knowledge in a constructive way. I'm someone that I remember in my own birth chart. I had like, I'm not gonna lie, I had really bad relationship astrology for friends and for lovers. And I remember when I initially saw it, I felt so doomed because my chart confirmed what I had been experiencing since I was 13 and 16, that, it's difficult to have friends without arguing or fighting with them or falling out with them. Boyfriends are so much work. Oh my God, like it's so hard. There's such a source of stress and anxiety. And then, like, I remember reading my chart and just it all being confirmed. But then my astrology teacher delivered the information to me in such a constructive way,
Mm.
in a way that, like basically, rather than thinking of it as someone who has bad, relationship astrology, it was more of, well, when I incarnated, my soul was given a choice what modules I wanted to study. And I was like, I want to study the relationships module. So
Mm.
then I was not going to learn anything if the universe brought me all these perfect little relationships and all these friendships that went great. I had to like lose some friends to
Mm.
discover how to be a good friend. I had to, experience some bullying in my life to discover how to be assertive. I had to be in a toxic, unhealthy relationship so that I could learn to love myself and to stop self-abandoning. And these were all things that my soul agreed to when I incarnated. So rather than feeling doomed by it, I felt liberated by the fact that, you know, okay, I'm accountable for this. This is what I chose to do, and I can transcend this. And I remember my teacher saying to me, just because you've experienced it to this point, Katrina, it doesn't mean you're going to experience it forever. Like you can move past these things. And now people come to me for relationship readings and advice. And I always think it's ironic because, I was the queen of being in unhealthy relationships for years. And like I'm only in a healthy relationship now in my late 30s. And it took me so long to get there. So much therapy, so much unpacking, so much inner work. But I don't, regret any of it because it got me to where I am now, where I can basically guide other people through their issues.
Mm.
Because I guess I have been through enough that I can kind of share my guidance in a way that isn't patronizing.
Yeah.
I think, people talk about marriage failing or relationship failing. I don't see relationships not working out as a failure. I often look at it a different way. I think, well, you know, if you had a relationship with someone for a few years, like you could reframe that as a success, particularly, if you built a life together or, if you made some beautiful memories together or if you had children together, that relationship was a success. Why should we let society define,
Yeah.
relationships that don't work out as failures? The same way if you have a business and you go bust,
Mm.
that wasn't a failure, that was a learning curve. And it's all about reframing things for clients so that they can be liberated by things that once used to shackle them. And I don't have much availability, as you know, Kira, because I work full time as a teacher and I
Yeah.
limit the amount of charts I do because I never want to compromise the quality. But if someone wants a reading with me and they're happy to wait a little bit, I would love to read for you because I do I do put so much into a chart. I
Yeah.
pour a lot of love and energy into it.
Mm.
And I always, try to tell people everything I see, everything that could potentially help them. Because in every chart, I see myself, a girl that was feeling doomed and trapped and didn't see a way out. So now when I look at charts, I try to see a way out for the person who's coming to me, a path. I see it as a map. So like someone comes to me and I'm like, let me read your map. Let me see what's going on here.
Oh, I could actually listen to you all day long. You're amazing. And get on that list because once you're on the list, you're on it. Whereas you might think, oh, I'd love to do that. But then the list will just get bigger and bigger, and I've no doubt it will. And the effort and the work and the love and just the way you do your birth charts, like you said, you're honest, but there's so much empathy and it's just so helpful. And I would just really highly recommend it. And I just have to also mention that before we came on, the internet was a bit dodgy, wasn't it? And it
Mm.
actually hasn't happened since we pressed the record button. It hasn't gone dodgy. Has it
It's
gone dodgy
amazing.
your side?
No, it's been
Yeah.
perfect the whole time. It's like the power of intention, that
Yeah.
lovely grounding exercise you did,
Yeah.
possibly, and just we asked our guides to come in and
Yeah.
everything. And yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah.
It's like a big spiritual hug or
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, well, that's what I felt then. I said, I bet it'll be fine. I bet once we log on, it'll be fine. It won't be lagging or it won't like there won't be any interference. But
Yeah,
I just really
definitely.
want to thank you so, so, so much. Is there anything you want to end with? Any soul's little message to anyone listening?
I'd like to thank you, Kira, for having me on because I remember after I read for you, you mentioned coming on your podcast, and straight away, like I felt
Mm,
such an opening up, expansive energy. I'm a manifesting generator, and whenever I get like a full-bodied yes, I remember thinking, yes, I would love
mm,
to do a podcast with Kira. And then when the opportunity arose this week, it just felt so right. The timing felt so good. I
yeah,
think sufficient time had passed since I read for you as well.
yeah.
But no, I guess I just want to say maybe to anybody that's going through anything hard at the moment, as a karmic astrologer, I'm really obsessed with the nodes of destiny.
Mm,
And the nodes right now are in Pisces. And when the North Node is in Pisces, the whole world goes through a sort of a spiritual awakening where
mm,
we all start to reconnect with a higher power. And even atheists, even people who believe in nothing,
mm,
they can go through experiences that can humble them and teach them, that can bring them to their knees almost and make them think, I have no other choice, but I need to ask God, because I'm running out of solutions. So no matter what anybody's going through right now, I would say to them, like, whether, you're riding high, or if you're going through some sort of adversity, like, put your faith in a higher power, because there's such beautiful supportive astrology there from the cosmos that are helping us all reconnect with our faith and our trust in the universe, that the universe has our back, and that there's this benevolent force out there that is way, way stronger than any of the negativity or offensive energy, that's put in front of our eyes every day. And like, if we can all kind of collectively lean into that vibration of believing in something bigger than ourselves, like, we can really change the world. And we can change our life's direction as well by having faith. And even if you don't believe in a God, I always say to people, pray to your ancestors, because nobody roots harder than for you than the people like who came before you, who brought you here. They're in your birth chart. They're with you, like, they never leave you. And yeah, I think that's just like the message maybe of hope I'd like to leave for
Oh.
closing thoughts, Kira.
Oh, I love it. When you were talking there, I could just feel this beautiful energy. So thank you so, so, so much. And the best way, when I put this out, I'll put your Instagram handle, and you have a website as well, don't you? Is that the best
Yes,
way to
I
reach out
do.
to you?
I do. I have a website, an Instagram handle, and people can send me a submission form on my website as well if they want to talk. Yeah. Thank you so much,
Amazing.
Kira.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.